Well, welcome everybody to another sports community live stream. It's Friday, so that can only mean one thing, which is Esports Friday. I'm your host, novice, person who has no idea what's going on. And joining me is our esports guru, Cameron Osterlin. Cameron, welcome. Where are we going today into this mysterious world of esports? And what can we learn?
I think we would affectionately call you a noob in the gaming circles, a novice esport person. Today, I wanted to have a look at how you become an esport Formula One athlete. Kind of just looking at the fact that it's basically open to anybody, and why that's cool.
Well, so when you say open to anyone, so you're saying how someone from downtown Mornington, where I am, or downtown Dingley, where you are, can make their way through the grades, for want of better terminology, to the professional esporting tournaments. Is that where we're heading?
Yeah, pretty much. The exclusions are basically you need to be 16 years or older. You obviously need to have the game. Well, you don't actually have to own it, I suppose. You just have to set a time within the game. So you have to have access to the game. And you have to, the legal term is you have to be able to play the game somewhere where it's not illegal to play the game, which is interesting, but that's just their terminology. So basically, you need to be able to legally play the game and be 16 years or older. That's the only real requirements for whether or not you're eligible to become an esport athlete. Obviously, the next step is, can you be as fast as the current esport athletes, which is always the next trick. Are you good? Are you good enough? And I guess the way that they run their models, it's about trying to unearth people all around the world who are good enough to be able to compete. And the Esports Series, which has been kicking off. This is the second round that we've just got going in the background. They're showing some kind of puff piece, but if we flick forward, you've got 5 hours ago, the third round of the F1 Esports Pro Series from this year, kicking off this morning. So what's 5 hours ago? Like 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, which they would have run for an hour or two. And there you got some footage of some of the esports competitors. So it's an interesting pathway. So say I was to become one of these guys, like I've gone through their qualification process, which we can talk about in a little while. I would then more or less be shipped over and join one of these teams for a period of time. They'd take me over there and then put me in their team setup, and I'd become a teammate of someone else under the branding of a particular team. And then I'd compete in the tournament to try and win the grand prize, which I think is something like 750,000 euros for the winning team or person, or it's quite sizable for this competition.
So, one of the things that's challenging traditional sport or physical sport, if I can use that terminology, is technology and the advent of technology. Even golf, the drivers hit the ball further, the balls go further. Cyclists, the bikes are lighter. They've got motors in them hidden sometimes. The swimming suits, the fish suits, world record times. If I'm in this case a gamer, what does my technology that I've got at home, like my keyboard and my PC, does that influence my ability, or is it just purely my ability to drive the car virtually? It's a very level playing field.
Well, okay. Well, the first part is unlike the actual Formula One competition, which is a whole bunch of different constructors and manufacturers. There's a whole variety of, performance within the cars themselves. So that's the first factor. When it's F1 Esports, that's not a factor. You're competing in the same car during the qualification process. The same vehicle is used by every single person. So it's about who can go the fastest in the same conditions. The second part about the actual physical technology that you're using, I guess it's a complicated answer. No is the simple answer. No, there's no downside to you using one form of technology or physical technology over another. But there can be. So you might use a controller like the one I've just got sitting here to play your games. Or you might use a fancy steering wheel like the one that's just popped up on screen. Great timing. Thank you very much, YouTube. That right there is a Fanatec, and that steering wheel is probably worth in the vicinity of $2,000 to $3,000 Australian. Whereas this here cost me maybe $60. Now, there is esports competitors who play on their controllers. They do exist, but they are few and far between. We see a similar thing with Rocket League, where there's a few players who use the keyboard and mouse to control the inputs, but most of them will use a controller. So the perception is then that the better steering wheel or the better controller gives you a better performance. But I think it's just down to kind of personal preference. Some people manage to find more being able to use the steering wheel. But there is a couple of competitors. I know one's from New Zealand, who is competing with some of these guys at a very high level using a controller. So, but the vast majority do use some kind of technology upgrade where they're using a better form of steering wheel or something like that.
So what about internet connection and upload? I don't know. I've just wandered off the track like I'm prone to do.
No, that's fine.
But what about internet upload and download speeds? Does that, because we know that there's a huge variance even in the time of day in a location. So does that have an impact on performance?
No, it shouldn't. What you might find is if you're playing an online game, it might alter the experience that you have with a poorer internet connection. But the game itself, so long as you've got a connection, the game takes all that information. And whatever you're doing at your end, it's just about the game sending that information to their servers and recognizing that. We've seen, I think, a few months ago when they were running the special series of esports versus real drivers when Formula One was still under lockdown. You saw Lando Norris, who we've spoken about before. He was trying to compete with what he says is the worst internet in the UK. But he was still managing to put in some laps when it was working. So for that, I'd guess it's more or less, if you manage to get to this kind of level, is the only time where that would become a problem. If you're unable to be on site, if like for some reason they say, okay, you can stay in Australia and you're going to play at home, that's the only time where it's ever going to affect you, where you might have connectivity issues on a race day and it stops you from competing. But it's not going to impact your actual output, the performance of whatever you're doing. So yeah, those sorts of things don't become limitations, more just small complications if they do occur. As long as you've got something, you'll be able to be involved.
No, cool. All right, so back to the journey. So even a mug like a newbie, and I don't know that I even qualify for that level of recognition yet, but so I can go onto a site and I can just register. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, I don't even think you need to do that. The way it kind of works is this is the challenge that they've set for the year, where basically if you've got the game, there'd be some kind of in-game platform where you take this challenge under your wing. You have a crack. You try to become Bottas, who's the Mercedes number 2 driver, and you try to beat his time. You try to achieve the goal. They have a couple of different ways you can qualify. So this is the first one where you've got to basically set the best time and catch the other driver or something like that. So they're trying to make it kind of fun and interactive the way that it is. So you got to deal with overtaking other drivers. It's not just a straight up time trial. But you also have some weekly and monthly events that they run where it might be just over a month. You've got a set track and go and set the fastest time you possibly can. And we can see some of the examples here. So this is round 1 in Monza. So I think they did 2 rounds of qualification here. So Monza in Italy was the track that they used, and then the Circuit of the Americas was the track for the second round, which doesn't have any data there. So here we've got the best time was a 1 minute 14 and 39 seconds, which 3 people managed to sit. 2 of them on the PlayStation. Might make that a bit bigger. 2 of them on the PlayStation. 2 of them on the PC and 1 of them on the PlayStation. So you can see a variety of consoles and platforms being used here with the PlayStation, the Xbox, and the PC.
Yeah, cool.
And then from there, the rules kind of open up and become a bit vague. I guess it's down to Formula One now. You set a good time, and Formula One decide whether or not they want to invite you to go into the next phase, which is a bit of a playoff kind of competition where the end result, I think, is a drafting scenario where F1 teams will decide whether or not they want to bring you into their team.
Via a draft type.
Yeah. So I guess the pro day, or what's the AFL equivalent of the NFL's pro day? I'm not really sure how do they do something like that, or a combine?
Yeah, the draft combine. Yeah,
combine. Yeah. So I guess the F1 Esports version of a combine is this kind of testing scenario where you're putting in some lap times. They might throw you in a couple of races against some competitors to see how you do against people in a live situation. And then, they're making their decision based on how you perform. So, you've got a very good chance if you get to that kind of level. But obviously it's very hard. Like, I'm not saying by bringing this up, I'm not saying that every kid out there's got a chance of doing it, but it shows you that the opportunity's there. And if you really do want to pursue this as a dream, there's nothing that says you can't. And I guess that's the opportunity.
Yeah, and when you look at it, again, you brought up AFL Combine, you look at the challenges of getting to the elite side from an athlete, and let's say we're in remote Victoria, for instance, remote South Australia or wherever, is I've got to be selected to be able to go to the next level. Whereas in this scenario it's pure performance based, isn't it? If you get to the time, then you get to the next level. There's obviously a selection criteria ultimately at the end, but if you're good enough, regardless of anything, it's just based on your own ability and performance to be there. So if
you make the first page, for example, if you make it to this page, you're going to get looked at. You're on someone's radar already. If you get that front page, they're going to look at you.
But the only barrier to getting onto that page is your own ability.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is very different to the selection of a physical sport in a lot of cases where, well, except for the first across the line type events where there's an absolute winner, but head-to-head competition. But a lot of the time, team selections are subjective. Scoring subjective. The ability to get to an event is, not always possible. The ability to train equally is not always there. Whereas, this is interesting, isn't it? So it really is almost, if technology and the platforms in the internet have become a non-issue, then it's really a very, very fair way of getting the best to be able to enable the best to truly rise to the top.
Yeah. And I think it's something where clubs could have an impact as well, where if you find people have the barrier of not being able to afford some of the equipment to make sure people have the best opportunity.
Yeah.
A club scenario where you've got, say, 15 people who use the same equipment over a period of 6 months versus one person having to buy, each of those 15 people having to buy the same piece of equipment. That's a perfect scenario for where you can try and give people the best opportunity and remove some of those barriers. Even if they're only perceived barriers, it still gives people the best opportunity.
Oh, and even in that video that you were playing before, Cam, it was 2 drivers and obviously a couple of other people in the room, So it's still the thing that I am learning about the top gaming and therefore, down below as well, is that it's a team sport. It's still a team sport that has all the requirements of teamwork, collaboration, human dynamics, etc. So it does. You're right. It does lend itself really well to to our physical clubs becoming gaming hubs as well. And again, if we just translate that a little bit to the reality of the world, one of the things that that grant funders are looking for is multi-purpose venues. They're not overly keen just to have single-purpose venues for funding. So even, soccer pitches and baseball diamonds and softball diamonds, which are quite unique in their application to sport, if you add the gaming component to it, it then makes your venue very usable by a very different group of the community for a lot longer than would traditionally be used potentially as well. So, and we're seeing the funders now looking at social Vic Health, South Australian government, we think is going to release grants that are going to be really about social connectiveness and mental health. So again, there's a very strong argument to say, well, you could mount a very strong argument that creating a gaming hub is a very positive way of achieving those goals.
Yeah, it's certainly on the cards. We are starting to see a bit of a resurgence as well of some of those boutique kind of gaming venues where people are coming together on the weekend and having a drink and playing games together in the city. We're hopefully going to look at a couple of examples down the line, but the old kind of arcade kind of fell away and they became kind of few and far between. They obviously still exist. You've got your time zones and whatever they're called these days, and they're in some like really key areas where they get a lot of traffic, particularly with the kids. But they used to be everywhere, so they kind of dipped in their popularity. And in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, we've started seeing old school gaming venues and bringing in some of those old arcade machines and combining it with some of this more modern technology with consoles and bringing people to be able to play the games together in a public and social environment. So that offering is starting to become a bit more popular again, which is really cool. So yeah, I see it as a big opportunity for social scenarios.
Yeah, I must admit, it takes me back about a year and a bit ago. We were doing some work setting up or assisting in the setup of a brand new club in Docklands under the Balti Bridge in Melbourne. Brand new facility, brand new community wasn't using it. Council wanted to just stimulate the organisation side of it. So, and very visionary leader. And they were looking to offer cricket and soccer for kids on this kid-size oval or playing surface. But on the other side of the coin, she was very keen to set up an esport gaming hub in the club rooms from day one. So not sure, I might follow that up and just see where she actually went with that, because that was very innovative. And this is the first time I'd actually thought about or heard about. Well, it's really the first time that esport actually really came on my radar in those discussions, which really took me by surprise.
And as with all sports, they start social. There's not many sports that start in a professional capacity. You get your interest in some kind of social way, even if it's as a kid. I mean, that playing as a kid is probably more social than it is about anything else, right? You're hanging out with friends. You're having a bunch of fun. So it always starts there. And the same goes with gaming. It always starts with having some fun with some other people and, having that banter and that jovial atmosphere, a bit of competition. And then I guess if you get hooked, you get hooked, and then you take it to the next level.
Yeah, cool. So is there any other... So is this very similar across the different genres of games, this sort of approach?
I'm not overly. So yeah, each game does kind of have their own style and way of doing it. I think you do find the kind of anybody can be a hero approach more common in gaming and in esport. But some of them do have some quite formal processes. But I think a lot of that's kind of just because that's how it's evolved, because of the lack of the grassroots development. So, the organizations, to try and, they've seen that this is popular, they've kind of thrown their resources at trying to make it a commercial entity, and have had to make kind of commercial decisions to try and find the right talent. But, it's because they don't have those structures feeding them talent to, change. If we already had some kind of grassroots structure in place, it would have been a very different landscape. I think you'd find a lot more of a bottom-up feeding system rather than a top kind of looking down, trying to pick and cherry pick people. So I think it's still a space that's evolving and changing. We saw the League of Legends League for Oceania has been shut down. So that's something that we spoke about earlier in the journey of Esports Friday. And I think that's, partially because of COVID, but partially because of them struggling to find a way to make it commercially viable. But that's not because of the game's popularity. That's maybe the market, maybe, a whole bunch of different things, but that's going to see a legacy, for example, esport having to take a different approach. And if they want to continue to make that viable, they've got to think outside the box.
Yeah, no, agreed. It's an evolving scenario, which is why it's of interest to us. So anything else you've got for us today, Cam, or is that our journey for today, Formula One?
I think that's it for today. It's something you can have a look at. So don't forget to check it out on YouTube. Obviously, you can't become an esports pro for this year anymore. That window's closed, but keep your eye out for next year. So now's a good time to start planning if you think you want to have a crack.
Planning and practicing, I think, is the two
indeed
the two things there. So no, very good, Cam. All right, well, that brings to an end another week of sports community live streams, and starting to get a bit of our momentum back with guests coming on a lot more regularly, as we took a little bit of a break over the last month or so with some of the days of live streaming. So, Cam, thank you very much. To everyone else that follows the live streams, thank you to you. Gary Leach from the Knox Tennis, we missed you today. You normally pipe up with some sort of comment, idea, or initiative that you've taken from Esport Friday and applied to your club. So I'm sure you'll watch the video, and we look forward to your thoughts next week. So until then, I'm Steve Palace. He's Cameron Ustelin, and we thank you for being part of our sports community.